Welcome back to Beyond the Clue by Phong. This case actually took place in Orlando, Florida, USA in 2008, and at that time, it sparked a massive wave of outrage across the entire country. And as of now, it's once again stirring up TikTok over there. So why, after 17 years, has this case not cooled down? What's the story behind it? Let's find out right now. Here's a quick summary. This is Caylee Anthony, born in 2005, and this is her biological mother, Caylee Anthony. The daughter is Caylee, the mother is Casey, alright? In 2008, Caylee passed away at just 3 years old, a truly inexplicable death, and despite many issues during the investigation, Caylee Anthony was acquitted. And with over 20 years of experience as a Conan fan, I don't believe this was simply an accident. To understand this case better, we first need to delve into the woman named Caylee Anthony. Casey was born in 1986 in Ohio to her mother Cindy and father George Anthony. Casey also had an older brother named Lee. Remember this family well because we'll be mentioning them a lot in this case. From an early age, Casey revealed herself to be a stubborn girl who always lied. In 2004, when Casey was 18 and her parents were planning to attend her high school graduation, they discovered that their daughter had lied about her academic performance and was actually failing subjects and couldn't graduate that semester. But that, of course, wasn't Casey's most disastrous lie. From 2004 to 2006, Casey worked part-time at Universal Studios. During this time, specifically in 2005, when Casey was 19, she became pregnant. Once again, she lied to her parents about her pregnancy until she gave birth. No one knew who the child's father was, and to this day, no one knows that information. And so, on May 9, 2005, little Caylee Anthony was born. However, her life seemed destined for misfortune. Casey insisted on giving the baby up for adoption to another family, as it was clear to her that Caylee was just a mistake. However, her maternal grandparents, Cindy and George, decided to raise Caylee. Casey still lived in the same house, but her role as a mother was virtually non-existent. For the next 2 years, from 2005 to 2007, Casey dated many people, even getting engaged only to call it off. In 2007, she told her parents she was still working at Universal Studios, but in reality, she was unemployed. This meant that during the time she was supposed to be working, she was out partying with friends, using money stolen from her parents. The stolen amount could have reached $5,000, while her parents were struggling financially, raising Caylee. By May 2008, Casey's lies unraveled, and Cindy decided to kick her out of the house because they were utterly exhausted by her excuses. A month later, Casey found a new place and moved out, taking Caylee with her. And that's when everything began. On the 9th of June, 2008, Casey took Caylee to her boyfriend's house. He later recounted many negative things about Casey, saying she was a terrible mother, constantly giving Caylee sleeping pills to keep her docile and tired so she wouldn't be active or troublesome. By the afternoon of the 15th of June, Casey dropped Caylee off at her grandparents' house to go on a date with another boyfriend. At her grandparents' house, Caylee went swimming with her grandmother in the backyard pool. This is an important detail for the case, so please remember it. It wasn't until the next afternoon, specifically 12:50 p.m. on the 16th of June, that Casey returned to pick up her daughter. George walked his granddaughter to the door, unknowingly seeing her alive for the last time. By 4 p.m. that day, Casey's phone's GPS still showed her lingering in that area, not having left yet, but no one knows what she was doing. By 7:54 p.m. that evening, Casey was seen at a Blockbuster video store with her new boyfriend, but Caylee was nowhere to be found. On the 17th of June, Casey stayed at her boyfriend's house all morning, then went to her parents' house in the afternoon. And when Cindy asked where Caylee was, she simply replied that the child was with a babysitter named Jenny. Afterwards, she borrowed a shovel from a neighbor. The next day, she informed Cindy that she had a business trip to Tampa and would be taking Caylee and the babysitter Jenny with her. During the trip, Cindy received no calls from Casey, even though she left many voicemails. When Casey finally called back, she reported that the babysitter Jenny had a serious accident and they couldn't come home immediately. By the night of the 20th of June, Caylee was seen participating in a wet t-shirt contest at a nightclub. Cindy continued to press for Caylee's whereabouts, but Caylee only said the child was with the babysitter Jenny. Yet, she had previously said Jenny had an accident and was in the hospital. 5 days later, on the 25th of June, Caylee told a friend that there was something in her car trunk that smelled like a dead body. Then, on the 27th of June, Caylee abandoned that car, derelict, in a parking lot near a junkyard. By the 1st of July, under Cindy's relentless pressure, Caylee was forced to say that Caylee was with a friend of hers, and she didn't even know where the child was. Cindy then posted on social media how much she missed Caylee. From the 4th of July to the 12th of July, Caylee plunged into partying, completely unconcerned about her daughter's whereabouts. Do you remember the car Caylee abandoned in the parking lot near the junkyard? It was later towed to an impound lot, and on the 15th of July, George was called to the impound lot to retrieve the car. They immediately noticed that the trunk had an odor, like decomposition. This happened just as Caylee's whereabouts were still vague, so Cindy called the police. She also decided to confront Caylee and get answers. And when cornered, Caylee said that Caylee had actually been kidnapped by the babysitter Jenny. But it gets even more wow. The police later investigated and discovered that the babysitter Jenny didn't actually exist. Yes, she was just a person created by Caylee's lies. At that point, Caylee admitted that Caylee had been missing for 31 days. And when the police asked why she didn't report it immediately after her daughter went missing, Caylee, crying, said she had tried to find the child herself. The police got involved the very next day. K9 dogs detected the smell of decomposition in Caylee's car, and she was arrested, initially for providing false information about the babysitter Jenny to the police. In her first court hearing, Caylee Anthony was declared a suspect in Caylee's disappearance. And worse, it could be a murder case, because authorities confirmed the decomposition smell in the car trunk was from human remains, not animal remains or waste. The search for Caylee Anthony's whereabouts continued. A few weeks later, a man named Roy went into the woods near Caylee's house and saw a small white object in the distance. Roy thought it was very likely a human skull, but at the time, he was distracted by many other things, and it wasn't until the next day that he remembered to call the police. Unfortunately, when the police arrived, they found no object matching the description in that area. A few days later, Roy reported finding a suspicious gray bag in the woods, but the police were very careless in their search. They eventually reported back to Roy that it was probably just a bag of trash. The case saw no further developments for 2 months. In September 2008, police searched Caylee's personal computer and realized this mother had searched for a lot of information related to weapons, extreme acts, and chloroform, a compound that can be used as an anesthetic. So, on the 14th of October, Caylee Anthony was indicted on many different charges, the most serious being first-degree murder. George himself testified before the jury, agreeing that his daughter was guilty. On the 24th of October, more information from the investigation revealed that a single hair was found in the car trunk and confirmed to match Caylee's hair sample. The problem was that the hair had detached when the body was in the process of decomposition. On the 11th of December, the man named Roy called the police again to report finding a small human skull in the woods near Caylee's house. I truly commend his dedication, as he clearly did not give up on the search from then until now. When the police arrived, they quickly confirmed it was human remains, and a piece of duct tape was found on the skull's mouth. On the 19th of December, 2008, DNA tests confirmed the remains belonged to Caylee Anthony, but too much time had passed, and they couldn't determine the cause of death. The duct tape wrapped around the victim's mouth suggested this was likely a murder, and that piece of tape was a crucial clue in the investigation because it could preserve fingerprints or the killer's DNA. However, this important clue was contaminated during analysis due to the forensic team's unprofessionalism, and if it wasn't pristine, the evidence wouldn't be strong enough to prove anything in court. On a side note, after it was confirmed that Caylee Anthony had passed away, George Anthony, her maternal grandfather, attempted to take his own life, but luckily, someone discovered him and saved him in time. 2 years passed, until May 4, 2011, the trial of Caylee Anthony officially began. Caylee's defense attorney was Jose Baez, a highly renowned and experienced lawyer. The prosecution painted a picture of a party-loving mother, completely irresponsible with her daughter, while the defense argued that Caylee was simply a distraught mother. They even claimed that Caylee had accidentally drowned in her grandparents' backyard pool, and George had tried to dispose of the body to cover it up. Caylee's audacity was unbelievable. She even dared to blame her own parents. In subsequent court sessions, spanning from the 15th of June to the 23rd of June, 2011, there were details that could be called an argument between the prosecution and the defense. Let's go over a few key points here. First, the hair in the car trunk. The hair found in the car trunk didn't have enough DNA to confirm 100% it was Caylee's hair. It could have been Casey's or Cindy's, like people with the same bloodline and gender. Although the hair had the characteristic of falling out from a decomposing body, and Caylee and Cindy were both alive, that means the hair could only have come from Caylee. However, this evidence was not enough to convince the jury, so the first piece of evidence was dismissed. Second, the smell of decomposition in the car trunk. The defense dismissed this evidence because it lacked scientific acceptance. It was all based on speculation. Third, the police found a dirty tissue inside the car trunk. This tissue had a compound on it that was basically formed from decomposing fat, meaning from human remains. But the defense countered that the stain could have come from garbage, not a dead body. Fatty acids and food waste could also create that substance. Fourth, the concentration of chloroform used as an anesthetic was also found in the car trunk. Do you remember Caylee's computer search history showing she had searched for chloroform? Yes, but the defense argued that this evidence was not convincing because the compound could completely originate from a stain on a fabric carpet. Fifth, the insects found in the car trunk were species associated with decomposing bodies, but the defense argued that those insects could also be found in ordinary garbage. Finally, Caylee's computer search history for anesthetics, weapons, and extreme acts. This evidence was perhaps the most undeniable, because no normal person would search for such keywords out of nowhere. At this point, Cindy came forward and claimed that she was the one who performed those searches because her dog had eaten something bad that day, and she had to find every way to deal with the problem. The issue is that the timestamps completely contradicted her testimony because she was at work at that time. So how could she have searched the web browser at home? The only explanation is that this woman was trying to cover for her daughter. In short, after all the evidence presented, the prosecution insisted it was a murder case, while the defense claimed it was just an accidental drowning and had nothing to do with Caylee. The jury also lacked forensic evidence to determine the cause of Caylee Anthony's death. In the 23rd of June, 2011 court session, Caylee's lawyer, Jose Baez, presented information that Caylee had been abused by her father when she was a child. However, this accusation was immediately denied by George in court. George asserted to the jury that Caylee did not have an accident, not at his home, and of course, he was not the one who disposed of the body in the mountain near his house. He knew nothing. He was simply a miserable grandfather who almost took his own life due to his granddaughter's passing. Then, Joe Baez turned and declared that Caylee's brother, Lee, also had inappropriate conduct with his sister, and it was possible that Caylee was the product of this incestuous relationship. This declaration was truly a farce of the century, because after DNA testing, Lee was not Caylee's biological father. Of course, it was a fabricated defense. Caylee had been lying since childhood. But Joe Baez didn't stop there. He claimed that on the 15th of June, 2008, the day Caylee was dropped off at her grandparents' house, she and her grandmother swam in the backyard pool. But Cindy forgot to close the pool afterwards, causing Caylee to accidentally fall into the pool, and the tragedy occurred. In a panic, the family decided to cover up the incident, and Caylee's only crime in this case was not reporting it to the police when it happened. Meanwhile, Caylee also played her role as a grieving mother very well, constantly crying and blowing her nose into tissues in court. The case concluded on the 5th of July, 2011. Everyone was stunned when Caylee Anthony was declared not guilty of all murder-related charges. That's right, not guilty. Caylee was only convicted of providing false information to the police, fined $4,000, and sentenced to 1 year in jail. But she had been held since October 2008, so that time was deducted from her sentence, meaning just 10 days after the final trial ended, Caylee Anthony was released on the 17th of July, 2011. The American public was absolutely furious after all they had witnessed, but Caylee remained acquitted and free, walking outside prison bars. In an interview in May 2017, 9 years after the case, in her first public interview after the final trial ended, Caylee repeatedly said, "I don't know," to almost all of the reporters' questions. "I don't know how she died. My father was watching her, and then she suddenly disappeared. I don't know. I don't know what happened." Caylee further asserted that she didn't care what people thought of her. She was content with herself and slept very well at night. Truly, America's most hated mom. Caylee confidently stated that she could still eat and sleep well, regardless of why her 3-year-old daughter died. And okay, the reason this case has resurfaced on TikTok is that on May 1st of this year, just over a month ago, Caylee Anthony posted her first video on TikTok under this account, declaring that from now on she would return as a legal advocate, helping the voiceless. Although she didn't specify what profession she's pursuing, perhaps becoming a lawyer, it's truly ridiculous. Caylee continues to mention Caylee. She knows people hate her from the 2008 case, and she keeps bringing it up as a way to attract attention. It's possible Caylee has been quite successful, as her TikTok account, newly created with just 3 videos, has already garnered over 80,000 followers. All posts have comments disabled, but it's clear the public is still very curious about America's most hated mom. Who knows what will happen next? Will America's most hated mom tell more lies? And that's all I've found out about the case of Caylee Marie Anthony, a trending case on TikTok that many people have been mentioning to me. If you have any comments about this case, or what you think about it, please leave a comment below. I'll stop the video here. This is probably my longest video ever, so anyone who watches it all deserves to be an angel.